Hello and welcome to week 14 of social psychology. Only 2 weeks left. Let's make them strong. I hope you've had a good break, at least a break from school. I know the pressures of work and family and all that are still there. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving and a little recharge the batteries a little bit, get through the next 2 weeks here, and then you have some time off from school. We're going to be looking at chapters 24 and 25 and really continuing to explore the idea of relationships and the importance of those in our lives. So as we look at the course book, here our first one, chapter 24, love, friendship, and social support. These are things that are, of course, on top of everybody's mind in terms of our current situation with social distancing here. So we look at the role here in the introduction. I look at the teens and friends and the social importance of teenagers and their friends, and that's when these connections start to become very important. And we go into this notion of how important relationships with other people are, and we see that right now. Many of us have maybe taking those for granted, and now that we can't have those connections at work or with our friends, we can't go out the same way we did. Maybe the establishments that we used to go to are closed, and we realize very, 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 very real how much we needed those, how important they were for our well-being and our mental health. So we start, where do these come from? So we're looking at some history in your own life. How do we basically pick the friends that we have? And there's some very simple factors that are involved. Of course, they've been modified with technology, but proximity and similarity are probably the two areas that affect who our friends are. It's the people who are close by, the people that we work with, the people that we went to school with. They're right there. And so that's where our friends happen. Of course, technology has changed what right there means, and we may have very close friends that are relative physically far away. But there's also that factor of familiarity. We've come to know them through social media and or through proximity, and those are the people that we pick as our friends. The last factor, of course, is reciprocity. They want to be our friend. So there's a connection. Like we have similarities. The friends that I have are mostly, sort of as I understand many male relationships to be, is activity based. So a lot of my friends are based on music, sports, racquetball, cycling, those kinds of things. Friends that I have professionally, that I work with, colleagues that I have around the country that I've spent time at conferences with. There was similarities that brought us together, and those are the connections that we make and the people that we call friends. Now, I have some little discussions here on school and friends, the benefit of work friends, which is actually going to be one of the topics in our assessment area. So, and then internet friends, what does that mean in terms of social media, and looking at the importance of discussions. In fact, my dissertation was actually on the social nature of online learning, and I was examining the impact that social connection, essentially making temporary friends, or that may have evolved into permanent friends, but connecting with people in an online class in that way that's mediated through technology. There's various variables that I measure that determine the degree of that, and how did that affect learning outcomes. In fact, it didn't. My study indicated that learning wasn't necessarily impacted. It was impact, obviously for some people it made a difference, but statistically it wasn't there. But it did statistically impact whether they liked taking the online class and whether they were going to take another online class again. And so as we're all jumping into online learning here with the restrictions, the fact that we have online discussions and that we want to reach out and connect with people as much as we can in our online classes has less to do with learning and has more to do with enjoying the class and being satisfied with the class. And that other factors contribute to learning, but certainly if we can make friends and we can make connections, even if we're just looking in the discussion boards and we're looking for Becky's response because it's always awesome, kind of thing, that alone can be a very, very important part of the success of an online class. And then I look into love relationships. Certainly there's online dating has become quite a thing. And I direct you to the Pew Research Center on Online Dating. I'm going to have you take a look at that for some of your assignments here. So our discussion is actually to do just that, to look at the Pew Research on Online Dating. You're free to share any of your own ideas about that, but we're going to be primarily reflecting, what are the findings from that particular research center. And then for the quiz, one question, and that is for you to examine the work friendships that you've had and what advantages those provided for you. When you've made friends at work, did it lower stress? Did it get you in trouble because you made friends with the wrong person? Did they introduce you to what we call the informal culture? There might be the policy manual, but there's the way things really work, and you had to make friends at work to get that information. Okay, we transition out of chapter 24 right into chapter 25, attachment. Of course, again, looking at the psychology of connecting with other people. Right off the bat, we introduce you to the history of attachment, and we go right back to Freud. The textbook doesn't go that far back, but I'm going to. But in terms of object relations, that Freud felt very much that we enter into the world with the capacity to connect, to attach. I'm using the word in the definition here, but to create an emotional bond with objects in our world, and it connects us with our caregivers, and it's a reciprocal relationship that brings our caregivers to us and brings us to our caregivers for that mutual benefit, beneficial relationship that we have there. So I talk about, or Freud talks about those being healthy and unhealthy, that we have this process where very early in life we need these deep emotional connections to survive. But then if they maintain for too long, we're actually supposed to go through a process that he called separation individuation, where we move away from the objects to which we are attached. At least the relationship with them starts to change. And I use a humorous example here. We just went through Thanksgiving, and I hope everybody watched a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving or it is then. You're introduced to Linus, one of the characters from the Peanuts comic strip, who has his security blanket. And this security is really kind of the point that we're going to get into, particularly when we look at the next theory, that Linus's blanket represents a sense of security from his younger days, that Linus is too old to be carrying around a blanket. And that's part of the comedy of the comic strip. And so his blanket is famous. It is the center of many of the topics within the cartoons and within the comic strips. And what it has to do with is a fixation of his emotional attachment onto an object, and that object relationship has not really happened. I don't mean to psychoanalyze Linus. We don't have to do that, but that's basically what's going on right there. So next we get into Harlow's monkeys and his study about the importance of maternal warmth and comforting and how that is important for development. And then finally we get into Bowlby's model. Probably that's kind of where the book talks about Harlow, but it talks mostly about Bowlby's model of secure attachment, anxious resistant attachment, avoidant and disorganized attachment, the different kind of attachment things. And there's parenting styles associated with that. So I kind of put a link in there. There's a way better resources than the book and me to talk about these kinds of things. So I have what is attachment theory, Bowlby's 4 stages, explain. And stages is kind of a funny name for that. They're not really like moving from one to the other, more like types. But nonetheless, there you go. There's a really good resource for that. And the question that we have for this is, when you have children who are forming their first emotional bond and they are attaching to individuals in their lives, important individuals, the quality of that relationship, as I discuss in puzzle pieces, creates a template upon which future relationships are based. I mean, even if it's a poor relationship, it's the model. It's what, that was the first experience someone had with attachment and caregiving. We very early start to incorporate that into our sense of identity and the creation of our role and our function within committed relationships. So these are very important in terms of predicting the emotional status or the skill that someone has in negotiating emotional relationships. And so I go into that a little bit in here about talking about adult levels where people who have been in romantic relationships, how they've described their relative security or insecurity in those. And we identify that there really is a very successful type of security. Me being secure with who I am and my ability to explore the world and be my own person, attached to another person who has those same security. So it's not really that we, quote unquote, need each other, it's that we want each other. And then, of course, over time we develop needs and the functional aspect of codependence. We build a life together, so those are the things that we need each other for. But that emotional security is very important. Now, keeping in mind that these early childhood experiences, as challenging as they can be to change, are not sentences. They're not necessarily that I had a rotten childhood, had a really hard time connecting with other people. Positive experiences have allowed people to grow beyond those early experiences. It is difficult. One of the things that we really take away from Freud, he had a very kind of a blanket statement. He'd say basically right up until adolescence, that's your personality is done. Nothing changes after that. Erickson thought different. Many of us know that that's not true. But if we can give him any credit at all for that, is the life that you had leading up to pre-adolescence and adolescence, that whole early childhood, the person you became is harder to change than things that happen after that. So we let's not say they can't be changed, but certainly if someone has had a rough time when they were very young and there's negative impacts for those are more difficult to change. Not impossible, but certainly more difficult. And so we get to our assessments here for Chapter 25, and I see that it says Chapter 1 quiz. Forgot to edit that. So anyway, it's Chapter 25 quiz. Remember, if I don't fix that. Chapter 25 discussion is consider how individuals use social media to gain support for themselves, to reach out and gain support from individuals. They're going through a rough time. You've all seen it. You've seen somebody post something out there, and the people who give all the emoticons and whatever. I go over that in the attention getting section. So I want you to have a discussion about that. There's positive and negatives about that. And then in the chapter quiz, I want you to talk about someone you know or yourself or whatever, and give an example of the connection between early childhood attachment and your capacities or that person's capacities for attachment as an adult. And so the application of that consideration that there is a connection there, or maybe there have been experiences, maybe it was good, there's been some experiences, you've been burned and now you're having a hard time connecting, or maybe it was bad and you've had some positive experiences and now you have lots of trust and lots of ability to connect with other people, all kinds of ways that could have played out. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, looking forward to that. Remember, this is week 14 of 15, just 2 more weeks. Let's make it strong and get through the end of the semester with excellent work. I'll see you then.